Hey, what's happening, everybody? Welcome back to Get a Load of This Trucking Podcast. As always, I am your host, Cameron Pesci. Um, and this episode is driven by Valley Truck and Insurance. It's a company I own. But I want to bring you the best and the latest and the greatest and folks that are making an impact in the trucking industry. I'm super excited to have our guest on today. I'll introduce him here in a sec. And I actually saw the guest that's about to speak on a different show with my friend Chris Jolly, or Freight Coach. You guys have heard him. He's been on the show. And if you don't follow him, go check him out. And he was talking about an interesting topic that caught my attention. And so today I want to bring on special guest Drew Wilder. He is the owner of Vicarious Liability Risk Management. And specifically, one of the topics that stood out on that, because I didn't know what that really meant. You may or may not know what that really means, but one of them was COI compliance services and reviewing of certificates of insurance as it translates to your company, protecting you on the freight brokerage side, but also on the carrier side and the asset side, what those certificates mean. I know everybody knows they need them. They got to send them to get a load and this and that. And today I'm going to bring Drew in and we're going to break down some of that stuff and talk about what he does and the services he offers, because it's a really cool product in this space to really help the transportation industry. I think it's much needed too. There's a lot of misconceptions around this. There's a lot of bad information and really lack of education and potentially even resources, because unless you're an attorney or something, a lot of these things are so terrible to try to read and decipher. So without further ado, Drew, what's up, man? How are you?
Hey, how you doing today?
Man, I'm doing so good. And finally, I got a guest coming from my region too, up in the Pacific Northwest. So that's good.
That's right. That's right. Thanks for having me today. I'm so excited to be here.
Hell yeah, man. How's weather over in Seattle?
Well, you know how Seattle is, man. It's that time of year, right? I think that it feels like we're going to have one of those early winters.
Oh, you
Because this past summer wasn't that hot, and I just think the rain and cold's probably gonna come sooner uh, this year than in the past. But I like it though. It's okay.
Yeah, and I welcome the rain this time of year just because of the recent wildfires that come through in August, right? So the smoke and the air quality and then the devastation it causes, obviously, to homes and threatening some towns and stuff. So I feel like the rain's a good thing in this
Yeah.
instance, other than, I'm not looking forward to snow and the going through the mountain passes and that kind of stuff as the weather turns. That's not what I look forward to. So
Well, you guys get that over your part of Eastern Washington? Yeah.
that's right, man.
Yeah.
Over in Spokane. So, hey, let's introduce you a little bit. Give the folks maybe a 30,000-foot view and overview of vicarious liability risk management and a little bit of the things that you do there and what that means, maybe in some layman terms for those folks. And then I'd love to dive into your background, because no doubt I know that you have an interesting background and that's led you to this point. So let's talk about some of that.
Well, at Vicarious Liability Risk Management, what we do for our clients is we provide certificate of insurance compliance. In doing so, we get our clients, of course, named as certificate holder on the certificate of insurance, additional insured, notice of cancellation, loss paid, things of that nature. But more importantly, the process that we follow, we're engaging with the insurance agent or insurance broker. And there is a difference between the two. And so we're bringing the relationship to the forefront so that, it's all about transparency. For instance, right? Say for instance, if uh, a freight broker customer of ours, they're moving a shipment, it's a flatbed shipment and it requires, say for instance, tarp coverage. We're communicating that to the insurance agent, insurance broker, and we want to know, does the policy include that coverage? And so we ask some very specific questions that only require yes and no answers, and it just brings about a level of transparency, so that in the event of a loss, and we've talked about this before, uh, all losses are going to be paid based on the merit. They have to be investigated, et cetera, and they're going to be paid or denied based on the merit. So our process in no way does it say, well, if a claim's filed, it's automatically going to be paid. It simply doesn't work that way. What our process does do is that it puts the freight broker, our customer, in a position where they can say, in the event of a loss, that they've followed the proper due diligence above and beyond what would be considered industry standards. And most importantly, the last thing I'll say about it real quickly is that insurance companies that insure freight brokers, they expect them to do a proper, a certain level of due diligence to, you know, protect them and the insurance company. So we help along with that.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of misconceptions around that. And on the surface, and folks out there, I know you guys have seen and dealt with certificates of insurance. I mean, whether you're a carrier asset, it doesn't matter where you're at, you have to deal with it at some point. And to them, it's just a little piece of paper. There's a couple check boxes, and then there's some numbers and like, hey, and as you said, I'm a certificate holder, right?
Right.
And I think that these folks think that all, if all these things are on there, it all means the same thing. It means that it's covered, and it means that it's going to take care of whatever they're trying to move, if you're a freight broker and that kind of stuff. But the harsh reality is it's not. That little piece of paper is just literally a sample representation of what is in the actual contract, aka the insurance policy, because that's what it is a transfer
Right.
of risk and a contract to cover certain things. And so that's where, when I saw your topic when you were chatting with Freight Coach, it was like, gosh, that's so interesting. And I never really even thought about it because I spend so much time trying to educate, right, and clients, and take our time to understand the different coverages and the unique risks that each of these carriers face, whether you're at, that kind of thing, so we can really hone in and get them the correct things. But in this day and age and technology and people with the ability to buy their own insurance and like use whoever they want, I have no doubt you probably see some stuff that it's like, yeah, that's not covered. Or, that, right. How did this concept come to be? Let's talk about your background, because obviously you did something that was involved in compliance or regular. I don't know. What's your background leading up to this?
I started out in the trucking industry with Viking Freight Systems, which is now
Okay.
FedEx Freight.
Yep.
And I was there for 7 years. And during my tenure, believe it or not, we had a terminal over in Spokane, Yakima, passcode called the Tri-Cities.
Yep.
But at any rate, there for 7 years, I was in compliance there, primarily cargo claims, OS&D, et cetera. But I also worked dock operations inbound and outbound before getting into compliance. After leaving Viking, I went to work for a smaller motor carrier, but they also operated as a freight broker, freight forwarder, local drayage, et cetera. So we had a lot of liabilities under one umbrella. And one of the important things about that is that as you know, that if you say to the customer that you're going to move their freight as a motor carrier, you better be moving it as a motor carrier, not as a broker, freight forward, et cetera. So one of my responsibilities was to make sure that everybody stayed in their lane in respects to the services we were providing. The other aspect of it, because we were operating as a freight forwarder and a freight broker, and we had all these various relationships, I found myself spending a large part of my week reviewing contracts with, motor carriers that we were going to hire, et cetera, et cetera. And that's where I started learning about certificates of insurance.
Okay.
One of the things I learned is that, as you stated, a lot of misinformation was going on, a lot. And so I was fortunate enough to have I met my mentor, which is my mentor today, freight transportation attorney. And I also met a former ICC practitioner. And those guys over the years taught me a lot, but I was a self study. So I read a lot of court cases, et cetera, started learning about what it took to actually execute the process. I'll say, and I'll put it this way. Many people will tell you that a certificate of insurance is a legal document. It's for informational purposes only. That is true. However, there are state statutes like the one in the state of Washington that clearly states that if an insurance agent or insurance broker issues a COI and misrepresents coverage, et cetera, they're liable for that. And it
Mhm.
doesn't matter whether the insurance agent or insurance broker is domiciled in the state of Washington or not. If the client is, the statute applies. And there's court cases that also support that finding in different circuits across the country. So, in other words, it's not an exact science, if that makes sense. But again, a certificate of insurance, if you request it properly and you do via email and it's a transparent process, it can be a very, very valuable tool for you. But you got to know what you're looking at, and you have to also pay attention to what's in the emails.
Yeah. And the boring in the weed stuff there is it all boils down to the contract, right?
Yes.
So like
Yes.
me as an insurance agency owner owning the trucking brokerage, we're fine sending out certs. There's certain things
Right.
we will and will not include with them or put in or put on them. A lot
Right.
of times we don't alter it. We'll include, if it's standard, additional insured and that kind of stuff. But it all boils back down to the contract. If that contract doesn't ask and state clearly and it's accepted by both parties that they need it, and we're getting requests for that, we're not sending it to them. There's no need. There's no reason for me to send that. Now, if I get the copy of the contract, we review it, we go through it, and it clearly outlines and states what's required and what's requested. Now we can start to include endorsements and start to include certain things on that. And so I think that's where I saw it perked my interest there for your need coming into this space, because people just don't understand. They really don't. They don't know what just a proof of insurance certificate is. Hey, I just need to verify insurance versus listing somebody as additionally insured or even including more verbiage and wording there, which we don't need to go into because for the sake of conversation, it probably bore listeners to death. But it's so valuable though, because the contract, going back to the very beginning, the insurance is literally just a contract. That's all it is, right? So what's the steps you take? I'd be curious on this, when you're working with these freight brokerages and to do their due diligence, because that's what resoundingly came through in what you're talking about there is you're doing the due diligence on the carriers and the partners you're working with to ensure and you're getting accurate information that these coverages are in fact in place.
Well, I would start with one of the things you just touched on, the contract itself.
Yeah.
Okay. When we start with a freight broker or shipper as a new client, the first thing that we do, like step one, is to find out whether or not they actually have contracts in place with the motor carriers that they're giving freight to. If the answer is yes, we want to know where that contract came from. Did a qualified freight transportation attorney draft that contract? Because if they didn't, you're probably going to have some issues.
You mean Chat
So
GPT won't suffice there or what?
exactly. So we establish whether they have agreements in place, where those agreements came from, right? And if it turns out that they're using an agreement that they're having motor carrier sign versus signing the motor carrier's agreement, that's a plus. Because at that point, if a freight transportation attorney did it, we're going to ask permission to reach out to him or her to let them know what we're doing, because we want to make sure that the process that we're following is in line with the contract. And sometimes there may be things in the contract, as you stated, that are simply not going to be covered in the insurance policy. So we establish those things, step one. And so we're attempting to get the client to establish a risk management, profile, or an appetite. So because the reality of it is, you're not always going to get everything that you want. And so to know if general liability isn't offered, this is the risk involved in dealing with that motor carrier. If contractual liability isn't offered, these are the risks. If hired auto liability isn't offered, these are the risks. So we establish those things first. From there, we develop a template that specific to our clients' requirements. And all that communication is done via email with the insurance agent, insurance broker. We're paying attention to the emails. We're paying attention to what's on the cert. As I mentioned to you, we don't get into reading endorsements and so forth because we're not insurance agents or brokers. And even if we were, uh, it's just not doable. You're reading a policy or the endorsements. There's coverage on page one. They take it back on page five,
Right.
and you got to really understand it. Uh, we did it once for a client of ours many years ago. The entire process, for one, took 36 hours of back and forth. And what we found out was we told them from the very beginning, based on what we had done, that the coverage wasn't there. We went through the process and it proved that the coverage wasn't there. Their attorney told them the same thing because he reviewed the documents. And so when we got back to the agent and we says, hey, can you really provide us the real policy endorsements and so forth for the policy? Because this is not it. He told us he could not be allowed in the public sphere. So we spent 36 hours doing nothing.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I think that leads and brings up like a huge point, and it's something that I've preached and something that I see in other people that are very successful and true, and not just a flash in a pan type product, service, person, whatever it might be, is talking to people that truly understand the industry, speak the language, know what they're up against on a day-to-day basis, and understand how that person operates, and that person being the client, whether they're a freight brokerage carrier, manufacturing company, it doesn't really matter, freight forwarder. In my world, we deal pretty much everything around trucking and transportation, for the sake of insurance. You had put out an article about too many subject matter experts coming and probably a result of COVID, and I've seen it as well. But I think that leads us right into that, is because these people, unfortunately, are talking to, I don't know, whoever they get referred to, whoever they see on TikTok, whoever they Google, whatever the case may be. And that person might not truly understand what they do, right? And what their risk is, what their exposure is, how to set them up. Like you said, hey, maybe they have a contract, but where'd they get the contract?
Right.
That's a big deal, right? Google,
Right.
people can Google things because they want to save a few $1,000, and so they find some boilerplate contract that they think might work, but in reality, it's like, well, that contract's based out of Minnesota in their court system, not Washington. Where, you know what I mean? That's just a small example, but what led you to write that article?
All of the things you just said. And you're right, COVID led to this. However, in subject matter experts in this industry, just like in other industries, have proven to be a valuable tool, for decades. However, as this COVID thing hit, I think, and just the expansion of social media, right, where now you can get in front of people that you couldn't before. I just noticed after COVID, this huge influx of subject matter experts that didn't have the background. And I kind of blame it a little bit on the end user, because if I'm going to listen to you, first of all, I'm going to look into your background and see what kind of experience you have. And if you have no experience in the area of the subject matter, I'm not going to waste time listening to you. But what I found is that a lot of freight brokers, not all, but quite a few, are willing to listen to these people. And they don't have the background. It's clearly some of the things they say it make no sense, but it's just out there. The other issue that I have with too many subject matter experts is the ones that do have the experience, but they put out bad information because they're not able to answer your question. For example, I had someone reach out to me a few weeks ago, and they wanted me to answer a question for them because of my background.
Okay.
I didn't have the answer, and I told them I didn't. I said I can refer you to someone that may, or I'll try to get the answer for you. But I didn't say to them, because I don't provide this service, I'm going to water it down and make it seem like it's really not important. Well, it's not worth the effort of digging into. Well, it's not worth the effort of digging into because you don't provide the service. Just tell people that. And the thing about it is that what really got me about it is that the listener, they're really relying on you. They trust you. And especially some of these folks that have years and years of experience. Okay. And so you're putting information out there that you know isn't correct, or you should know isn't correct, simply because you want to better your brand. I don't think that's right.
No, and it's stay in your lane, right? And we
Stay in
preach
your
that.
lane.
Stay in your
Stay in
lane.
your lane.
Yeah, and we preach that all the time. And I mean, I might not know the answer to everything, but I'm not I'm prideful, but it's like I'll own when I don't know it, and I might not know, but I do know somebody that might know, like you just said, and I'm going to refer you to them. I'm going to connect you, or I'm going to figure out, take the time to at least give you a direction and say, hey, we don't know, but talk to my guy Drew. You want to talk about COI compliance? I mean, I know a little bit about that side of the house, but you know a lot more about the regulatory, the contract review, and some of those things that you no doubt have spent time doing with your mentors and your past experience. That I'm not going to answer that question. I'm going to say, call my boy Drew. He has a better idea of this, and if he doesn't know, I trust that he's going to help you find somebody that does know. Like, that's how we operate, right?
I would like to say one last thing about it. Say, for example, if someone called me up and wanted to talk to me about safety, okay?
There you go.
I was
It's
a
a good
safety
one.
director. I was a safety director for 11 years. I
Yep.
did a great job at it, but that was 20 years ago. And we don't offer that service. I'm not gonna say to you or the person calling me, oh, the problem you have isn't that big of a deal because I don't provide the service anymore. That's what people are doing. That's what I don't like.
Hmm.
If you don't provide the service, just say you don't provide the service. But don't try to water it down. Don't try to give information that you know isn't really helpful, right? Or try because of artificial intelligence, AI, and streamlining and so forth. People are looking for this easy fix. How can I get something done faster? Well, guess what? Sometimes faster isn't better,
Nope.
and so I just see a lot of that going on, and I just think it's wrong. I just wouldn't do it.
No, and I think you care too much about the industry, right? You care
Right,
too much about the end user because it does truly hurt them too, or like you said, it's just misinformation that may not be relevant or old, or if it is old, has that person done the due diligence to keep up on subject
yes.
matter, continuing education, whatever the circumstance is there. So, what are what have been some of the biggest challenges that you faced when you started this journey? Because I have to imagine when people create a business plan, this is not on their business plan to say, hey, I need to go find Drew and you know
Right,
vicarious liability risk management and put them into my arsenal, right?
right.
So let's talk about that. Like, I mean, I know that if you were to call up a client and
Mhm.
they don't have any pain points, they're not even aware that they have a problem, because that's
Right,
part of the issue, is people aren't educated or don't know what they don't know, and that's
right.
through no fault of their own, which is why we try to do this podcast. Let's talk about those problems. Like, what have you faced?
Well, starting out in the business, to be honest with you, I couldn't give it away. I couldn't even get anybody to take it for free. You
Yeah.
know, and the reason being is that again, a lot of misinformation uh, was going on at that time, and this was before states had put together regulations governing certificates of insurance. And so, again, there was just a lot of misinformation out there. I know when I was risk manager for the motor carrier, our insurance agent, when we renewed our policy every year, he would bring us like he would just say, "How many certificate holders do you guys have? How many shippers you have that want to be certificate holders?" Right? And he would bring this big binder with certificates in it and hand it to us. He knew they weren't any good, but that's the kind of stuff that was going on. And so, because of that, people just weren't receptive to what I was offering. They just weren't. The other thing is that, at least from my experience, this is not a service that you're going to get a lot of customers cold calling. there's got to be some relationships in place. You got to meet people, talk to them, shake their hand, make them feel good about you as a person, and then you can get into what you do. But talking about what you do up front, it simply doesn't work because they're going to say, "Oh, we do that every single day. We follow it too," but they really don't. So it was me understanding that I got to get out and meet people, go to conferences, do all of the legwork, etc. Now, with the expansion of social media and LinkedIn and stuff like that, that's helped the process. But you still got to you still got to know people.
Yeah, no, I love it. And that's why I was happy to have you on, and hopefully it gained some influence and opened some people's eyes to a product. So when I see somebody doing something or filling a void and serving a purpose that truly benefits the trucking industry, in all shapes and sizes, it's like, yeah, I want to talk to them and I want to get them out and promote it, man. So I think it's sweet. I think it's such a cool product. If people want to learn more about it, I know that you're active on LinkedIn and that kind of stuff, but tell people where they can find out, follow you, inquire, chat, all that good stuff.
Well, our website is VLRMGT.com. And you can find me on LinkedIn, Drew Singleton Wilder. Those are the two places that you can find me. I would say that if you really want to learn more about what we do, just follow me on LinkedIn. I'm constantly putting out posts, informational type stuff as well. It's not all about doing business with us. Of course, I want to make money, but I want to educate the industry as well. And so if you learn something from me as an end user, great. Tell people about it. But it's not all about, you know, can you give me some money?
Yeah, I think relationships huge, man. That's the key piece right there, is because
Yes.
if you don't trust, you don't value that person, and you don't have a need for it, there's really no value exchange there. And so I think identifying those needs, talking to those people, getting to the people that truly do desire and want help in the certain areas are what it's about, man. And I can appreciate that. What do you see coming in the next, like, what are some things you're excited about where you're heading over this next, quarter, 2 quarters, year, something like that? But what do you have rolling out, or what do you have coming ahead?
Well, we have a big announcement coming up in the next couple of weeks. I'm excited about.
Okay.
We've
Stay tuned
aligned
for that.
ourselves with Freight Validate, and it's a huge collaboration, and we're going to be fighting double brokering fraud as a
Sweet.
lot of entities are doing. But we put together a good team, and I think that the knowledge base between all of us, um, I'm excited about the things that we're going to be able to do moving forward.
Why do you think double brokering is so prevalent? I mean, it's always been a thing, right? There's always
Yeah,
forms and fashions of it, and then it seems to be there's legal ways to double broker, and then illegal ways to double broker, like if you want to call it what it is. But
right,
but recently, that seems to be the trend in the news
mm,
and the whole. I get calls about this all the time. Double brokering. It's a
right.
thing. But talk about that, man. What's up?
Well, when I first start really paying attention to this double brokering thing, which was after COVID, my initial thought was because I didn't know how bad it had gotten. So my initial thought was, double broker has been going on for 40 years. What's the big deal? We used to call it blind shipments.
Right.
But then I dug into it some more and started seeing what was really going on, and a lot of it spiked after COVID, from what I understand, because during the pandemic, a lot of people didn't want to work, so motor carriers and shippers, I guess, found themselves using um, third parties from other countries, Philippines, Costa Rica, etc., Ukraine, from what I understand. And so when post COVID, the money that these contractors were making, they weren't making it anymore. That's what I'm hearing. And so, they came up with this scheme to make money. And so that's how it really expanded. I think that just the expansion of the internet and so forth has helped them do it as well. But at the end of the day, um, I think it just comes down to, and not one to paint it with a broad brush, but I think 90% of it or more comes down to freight brokers not doing proper due diligence, period.
Yeah.
Shippers not doing proper due diligence, period.
Yeah.
They're taking profits and convenience, putting it first, and then when they get hosed, then they want to holla foul. You got to do the due diligence. And if you
Yeah.
don't, you get what you get. That's what I say. Don't mean to be harsh, but you got to tell the truth sometimes.
No, I think you do. And they share in the negligence too, right? They're the ones that
Right,
chose to partake in the deal and do this. And then, like you said, bitch and moan about when they don't get
right.
paid. And it's like,
Exactly.
I think a lot of it came about, you're right, with utilization of whether it be call centers or virtual employees or virtual assistants
Right.
or really dispatching services, right? That's kind of where a lot of that I think angled in from. And so these folks that are trying to outsource, and I think at the core of that, as a business owner and these guys that are doing it, don't necessarily set out on that adventure to intend to do the double brokering or get double brokered and that kind of stuff. But then it just opens them up, because then you get these predatory companies coming in that do have the intent to legit double broker, not pay you, scam you, this and that. So that'll be cool. I'm excited. I'm gonna stay tuned for that announcement you got on the tool that'll help these guys with their due diligence, man. I think technology is a good thing. AI stuff's a good thing. Public data is a good thing when used correctly as a tool to help you, which I'm guessing is what you guys are doing there. So I'll be pumped to hear about that.
One last thing I'd like to touch on real quick is you brought up dispatch services.
Yeah.
I actually wrote an article with Bill Robinson um, up in Canada
Okay.
uh, on the subject of dispatch services several months ago. And
Okay.
it really had nothing to do with the double brokering part, which it does come into play. You're correct. But my biggest thing about uh, dispatch services is that I wouldn't use them because, again, there's not everyone. I don't want to paint it with a broad brush, but there's a lot of folks in that space that simply don't have the proper training, and you're entrusting them to dispatch your trucks and do a whole lot of other things that can bring about liability. I just wouldn't do it.
No, I agree. And a lot of folks too, and this is the beauty of like the American dream and like these truckers that set out, and we all know that the industry is comprised mostly of non-fleet folks, right? Mom and
Yes.
pop type shops where you might have a wife, you might have a spouse or a
Mhm.
brother or sister or cousin or someone you trust helping you do the dispatching. Well, unfortunately, sometimes they don't have that, or things happen, or health, or whatever the case is. So then
Right.
they're looking for ways to keep running and maybe be a little more efficient or get more time back or whatever.
Right.
And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, let's check out this dispatching service, or someone happened to cold call them and it's like, oh, that sounds good. Let's try
Right.
it. And unfortunately, sometimes it doesn't work out right.
Yes.
So I'm not saying, like you said, broad strokes. I'm not saying all dispatching's bad. It's not.
Right.
Um, but right, big but asterisk there. It's like, man, do your due diligence on that too, and make
Yes.
sure you get a finger on the pulse and you know what's going on in your day to day, and um, all that kind of stuff, man. But listen, Drew, this has been great. I love the conversation. I'll put all his contact info in the show notes and all that kind of stuff, where you can follow him, find him, get in touch, go to the website and all that kind of stuff. And no doubt, check him out on LinkedIn, because that's where I saw him and came across the information that he's putting out. And so it's constant value, it's constant things that can help you, quick digestible content that you can take and take a couple things from to implement real time in your business or think about. That's kind of the biggest thing there. So any last departing wisdom, Drew, that you'd like to share?
Hey, man, you summed it up. Thanks for having me, and I look forward to collaborating with you in the future.
My man, I appreciate it. All right, guys. As always, you'll find us on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, podcasts, all the different places. We got the Facebook group, Get a Load of This. Go ahead, you can get in there. There's a lot of different content that goes through there, some good offerings. Follow us on LinkedIn. You can go to the website, check it out, get a hold of us. So, as always, appreciate you guys. Thank you.